Emily stood in the middle of the wedding hall, smiling as she carried 2 plates of food to her cousins. The place was alive with music and laughter, the kind of warmth she had always loved about family gatherings. She laughed freely with her relatives, answering questions and greeting old friends who hadn't seen her in years. For a brief moment, she felt like herself again, the Emily before marriage, the one who belonged in this sea of familiar faces. But Marcus's eyes followed her every move. He sat at the edge of the table, his jaw clenched, his hand tightening around the glass in front of him. He didn't like the way she laughed so easily, didn't like how people's attention turned toward her. When Emily paused to greet an old family friend, a man in his 50s with graying hair who had once been her neighbor, Marcus's expression hardened. She only said a few words, nothing more than a polite exchange, but Marcus's face darkened. To him, even a smile given to another man was betrayal. Emily returned to his side, still holding her gentle smile, but his hand shot out and gripped her wrist. "What was that?" he hissed under his breath. "What?" she whispered back, her smile frozen, trying not to draw attention. "He's just an old neighbor." Marcus's nostrils flared. "You think I'm a fool?" Before she could answer, before she could pull away or calm him down, Marcus's palm struck her cheek. The sound was sharp, louder than the music, louder than the chatter. The slap echoed through the hall, slicing the air in half. The room went silent. Glasses froze in midair, forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye turned to them. Emily stood frozen, her cheek burning, her breath caught in her throat. The sting was nothing compared to the wave of shame that rushed through her body. Heat rose in her face, not just from pain but from the humiliation of standing exposed before her family, her friends, her entire world. No one spoke. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered, their faces a mix of pity and shock. Children stared wide-eyed, clinging to their parents. Emily wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, but Marcus tightened his grip on her arm and forced her to stay still. Her heart pounded wildly, not only from the slap, but from the fear that this moment would never leave her. The humiliation was stamped into her skin, into her memory forever. Her father wasn't there. Colonel James Carter, the man whose shadow still loomed over her life. He was delayed, called away by duty, but everyone in that hall knew him. Everyone knew his stern face, his unbending principles, his belief in respect above all else. If he had been there, Marcus would never have dared. And yet, the thought of him lingered in the silence. The guests shifted nervously, already imagining what would happen when the colonel arrived. Emily lowered her eyes, tears threatening to spill but refusing to fall. Her body trembled, her spirit cracked, but inside her chest a storm was forming. This was no longer something she, or anyone else, could ignore. Once full of ambition, Emily had dreamed of becoming a lawyer. As a young girl, she would sit in her room late at night, reading books about justice, imagining herself standing in a courtroom, defending those who could not defend themselves. She was bright, hardworking, and determined. Teachers admired her focus. Her father, Colonel James Carter, though strict, often reminded her that strength and discipline would carry her far. Emily believed it. She believed she was destined for something meaningful. But life shifted when she met Marcus. He was charming then, polished and confident, a man who seemed to shine wherever he went. He spoke to her in a way that made her feel seen, special, chosen. He encouraged her, told her she was beautiful and deserved to be adored. In his presence, she felt warm and safe. Slowly, her focus drifted away from law books and classrooms. Marcus convinced her that love was more important than ambition, that he would take care of her, and she believed him. Emily gave up her dream of law school. She told herself it was temporary, that marriage and love could also be fulfilling. But over time, she discovered that Marcus's charm was like a mask, and beneath it lived something darker. In the early days, Marcus was affectionate and attentive. He bought her flowers, opened doors for her, and called her his queen. But as the months passed, little things began to change. He grew jealous easily, first over her friends, then her family, and eventually even strangers. He didn't like her talking too much when they were out. He told her she laughed too loudly, dressed too brightly, or gave people the wrong impression. At first he spoke softly, framing his words as concern. But soon the concern turned into orders. Bit by bit he isolated her. He discouraged her from meeting her old friends. He claimed her father was too controlling, that she needed to distance herself from him. He took her phone for safekeeping, when he didn't want her speaking to anyone. What Emily had thought was love slowly became a cage. Marcus, to the outside world, was a successful businessman. He wore tailored suits, drove a fine car, and charmed his way through meetings and parties. People envied Emily for marrying a man who seemed so capable and confident. But behind closed doors, he was insecure, quick to anger, and obsessed with control. He feared losing her, not out of love, but because she was a reflection of him. To Marcus, Emily wasn't a partner. She was proof of his status, something to display and possess. Emily's family noticed the change in her. She had once been outspoken, smiling and full of energy, but now she was quieter, her laughter less frequent. Her mother worried in silence, but it was her father who saw the truth most clearly. Colonel Carter, a man of strict discipline and unshakable values, believed in respect above all else. He had raised Emily to be strong, to know her worth. He could see that Marcus resented him, perhaps because Marcus knew he could never measure up to the colonel's standards. The colonel often reminded Emily of who she was. "Respect yourself," he would say. "Never let anyone take your dignity." Emily nodded, but in her heart, fear gnawed at her. Marcus's shadow was heavy, and she felt trapped between the man she had chosen and the father who demanded she remember her strength. Inside Emily's mind, a war raged every day. Part of her longed to break free, to reclaim her ambition and the dreams she once carried. But another voice whispered cruelly, "You chose this life. You don't deserve better. You gave up your dreams and now it's too late." That voice kept her quiet. It kept her enduring the harsh words, the controlling grip, the moments of shame that left her broken inside. The stakes for Emily grew heavier with each passing day. It was not just about enduring Marcus's temper. It was about her very sense of self. If she stayed, she risked losing more than her safety. She would lose the woman she once was, the woman who believed in justice, in freedom, in her own worth. If she left, she faced fear, shame, and the unknown. And so Emily lived between two worlds, the one Marcus forced upon her, and the one her father had prepared her for. She carried her fear quietly, but deep inside, the battle lines were already drawn. Her dignity, her safety, and her self-respect were on the line. It was only a matter of time before something happened that would force her to choose which world she belonged to. The slap at the wedding becomes the event that cannot be ignored. Emily's cheek still burned as if fire had touched it. Her heart raced, and her vision blurred with tears. She wanted to run far away, to escape the sea of staring eyes. So she turned and hurried toward the door. But before she could reach it, Marcus caught her arm with a firm grip. His face was tight with anger, but his voice was cold and low, meant only for her. "Don't you dare make a scene," he hissed. "I can't stay here," Emily whispered, trying to pull free. But Marcus yanked her back so hard that she stumbled. He dragged her to their table, forcing her to sit down beside him. He leaned close, smiling for the crowd, but his whisper was sharp as a blade. "Wipe those tears. Smile. Now." Emily lifted her chin and tried to obey. She curved her lips into a shaky smile while tears slipped silently down her cheeks. The room was still heavy with silence, but slowly, the music started again. People whispered behind their hands, their eyes darting toward the couple and then away. Some looked at her with pity, their faces full of quiet sympathy. Others shook their heads, judging her, blaming her for somehow provoking Marcus. But none of them would forget what they had seen. The sound of that slap had been too loud, too final. Emily's cousins sat at the far end of the table, frozen. One of them, a young man named Daniel, pulled out his phone under the table. His hands trembled as he typed a message to Colonel James Carter. Daniel knew the colonel wasn't there yet. He had been delayed by duty, but Daniel also knew he needed to hear what had just happened. The message was short. "You need to come." Marcus hit Emily. Everyone saw it. Across the hall, the bride's laughter faltered. The celebration felt broken now, like a glass dropped on the floor. No matter how the band tried to fill the air with music, the wound in the room was too deep to ignore. Emily sat stiffly beside Marcus, her hands clenched in her lap. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide her face, but Marcus kept his arm draped around her shoulders as if nothing had happened. To everyone else, it might have looked like a gesture of affection, but Emily felt the weight of control pressing down on her. Her mind raced. She thought of her father, the man who had taught her to be strong, the man who would never have allowed anyone to disrespect her this way. The thought of him walking into this hall, seeing her like this, made her heart pound even harder. She felt both relief and dread. Relief that he would protect her. Dread because Marcus and her father had never seen eye to eye, and this would set fire to everything. Guests whispered louder now. A group of older women shook their heads, murmuring that no man should strike his wife in public. A few men looked uneasy, shifting in their seats, as though they wanted to stand up but couldn't bring themselves to challenge Marcus. Everyone was waiting, in their own way, for what would happen next. Marcus leaned close again, his voice soft but filled with venom. "You embarrassed me tonight, Emily. Don't forget who you belong to." Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she didn't belong to anyone, but the words stayed trapped in her chest. Fear and shame held her captive. At that same moment, Daniel's phone buzzed. A single reply appeared on the screen. "I'm on my way." Daniel looked across the hall at Emily. Their eyes met for just a second, and though she didn't know what he had done, she sensed something had shifted. The storm she dreaded was already moving closer. The inciting incident was not only the slap, raw and public, it was the shadow of her father, Colonel Carter, now on his way. His presence would ignite everything. Emily sat silently, her forced smile fading as the weight of the moment grew heavier. Inside, her spirit cried out. The humiliation was carved into her heart, and the knowledge that her father was coming meant that nothing about this night could be hidden. Nothing could be smoothed over or forgotten. The waiting was unbearable. Every second ticked like a drumbeat, pushing her closer to the explosion that was certain to come. Marcus tries to justify himself later, sitting across from Emily in their living room. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as if nothing terrible had happened at the wedding. "You embarrassed me first," he said, his eyes hard. "You laughed too loudly. You spoke to that man like I wasn't even there. What did you expect me to do?" Emily's lips parted, but no words came. She sat on the sofa, her fingers twisting in her lap, her cheeks still faintly sore. She wanted to shout, to remind him that nothing excused his hand on her face, but fear tied her tongue. Marcus leaned closer. "You're my wife, Emily. My wife. I will not let you humiliate me in front of people. I had to remind you of your place." Her heart sank at his words. "Remind you of your place." The phrase echoed in her mind like a chain clinking shut. The next morning, Marcus grew colder. He seized her phone and locked it in his desk. "You don't need this," he told her. "Too many people filling your head with nonsense. If anyone needs to reach you, they can call me." She tried to protest. "But my family." "Enough," he snapped, his voice like thunder. "Your family doesn't matter. Only I do. You hear me?" Emily lowered her head, fear pressing down on her chest. Each day after the wedding, Marcus tightened his control. He followed her from room to room, questioned her every word, and reminded her that leaving was not an option. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning. Should I leave? Can I leave? What if he finds me? What if my father forces a fight and someone gets hurt? The questions drowned her, leaving her exhausted and hopeless. Memories began to surface, little flashes of earlier abuse that she had buried. She remembered the first time Marcus raised his voice at her, so loud she flinched and dropped the glass she was holding. He had apologized afterward, bringing her roses. "You just make me crazy sometimes," he had said, and she had believed it was her fault. She remembered the first time he gripped her arm too tightly, leaving faint bruises on her skin. "I'm sorry," he had whispered. "I just love you too much." The pattern was clear now, but her heart was tangled. She had stayed, each time telling herself he would change. But the wedding slap had made one thing certain. He would not stop. Her friends noticed her silence. One afternoon, her childhood friend Clara came to visit. Clara reached for Emily's hand and whispered, "You don't have to live like this. You deserve better." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she shook her head. "You don't understand. If I leave, he'll find me. And if I stay, at least I can keep things calm." Clara squeezed her hand tighter. "Keeping things calm is not the same as being safe, Emily." Her relatives tried too. Her mother called when Marcus wasn't home, her voice trembling. "Please talk to me. Please tell me what's happening." But Emily stayed silent. Shame wrapped around her like chains. She didn't want anyone to see how broken she felt. She didn't want to admit she had given up her dreams, her strength, her freedom, for this. Her father, Colonel Carter, was the hardest to face. When she visited him after the wedding, she tried to smile, to act normal. But the Colonel's sharp eyes studied her, and she knew he saw everything. He didn't need her words to recognize the truth. He spoke quietly, his voice steady but firm. "Emily, you don't have to tell me. I can see it. You're hurting." Her throat tightened. "Dad, please. I raised you to know respect," he continued. "And no man who truly respects you would raise his hand against you. Ever." His words cut deep. They comforted her, yes, but they also frightened her. Because if her father knew the full truth, his anger toward Marcus would explode, and Marcus would not back down. Emily felt trapped between two powerful men, one who broke her down with control, and one who demanded she rise up and reclaim herself. At home, Marcus grew more possessive. He would grip her chin, forcing her to look at him. "You are mine, Emily. Mean. Don't ever forget that." His words made her shiver, but she forced a nod. She had learned to survive by keeping him calm. But when she saw her father, his stern voice reminded her of who she used to be. "You are not a possession," he told her. "You are my daughter. Strong. Worthy. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." Inside Emily, the war grew louder. Each day she felt herself stretched thin, pulled like a rope in a tug of war. Marcus yanked on one end, insisting she belonged to him, while her father pulled from the other, demanding she stand on her own. Emily felt like she might break in two. She walked through each day with her heart heavy, her spirit bruised. She wanted freedom, but fear chained her to Marcus. She wanted peace, but shame silenced her voice. The pressure built with every word, every glare, every silence. She knew something had to give. She could not stay trapped between them forever. One day, she would have to choose. And when she did, nothing would ever be the same again. Marcus belittles Emily again, this time at a family dinner where her father is present. The long table was filled with dishes, laughter, and clinking glasses, but for Emily, the air was heavy. She sat quietly, trying to enjoy the evening, but Marcus's voice cut through the warmth like a knife. "Look at you," he sneered loud enough for everyone to hear. "You can't even pass the salt without fumbling. How could I ever expect you to do anything right?" The room grew still. Emily lowered her eyes, her hands trembling as she passed the salt shaker. Her cheeks burned with shame. She could feel the eyes of her relatives on her, some filled with pity, others with disapproval. Colonel Carter, sitting at the head of the table, said nothing at first. His sharp gaze locked on Marcus, who seemed to grow bolder under the silence. Marcus leaned back in his chair, smirking as if daring the colonel to respond. "See, this is what I live with," Marcus said, gesturing at Emily. "A woman who can't think for herself. I've carried her for years and still, she embarrasses me." Emily's throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. She wanted to disappear, to shrink into nothing. But then her father's voice came, calm and steady. "Marcus," Colonel Carter said, his tone low but commanding. "Do you know what respect means?" Marcus blinked, caught off guard. He had expected anger, maybe even fists, but not this. "Of course I know," he said quickly, trying to laugh it off. "Respect is earned." The colonel's eyes narrowed. "Respect is never forced. It is given freely. It is built on honor and sacrifice. I led men into battle who gave their lives because they respected me, not because I demanded it. That is true strength." The table was silent. Everyone listened as the colonel continued, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "A man who belittles his wife in public, who raises his hand against her, is not strong. He is weak, because real strength is not in control. It is in protection." Marcus's smirk faltered. His face reddened, but he forced a laugh. "You think you can tell me how to run my marriage?" Colonel Carter leaned forward, his gaze sharp. "I don't need to tell you. Your actions already reveal the kind of man you are. And let me be clear, you will not strike my daughter again." Marcus's pride flared. He pushed back his chair and stood, his hand curling into a fist. "She is my wife. She belongs to me." Emily's heart stopped. She saw the familiar rage in his eyes, the same rage that had burned in him at the wedding. He raised his hand toward her again, his body tense with fury. But before he could touch her, Colonel Carter was on his feet. With one swift movement, the colonel's hand gripped Marcus's wrist, stopping it midair. His grip was firm, unyielding. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "Enough," he said. The room gasped. Marcus struggled, but the colonel's strength was immovable. For the first time, Marcus looked small, powerless, his bravado stripped away in front of everyone. Emily's chest heaved. Her father's words rang in her ears. Respect is never forced. Real strength is in protection. And in that moment, something inside her broke free. She pushed back her chair and stood, her voice trembling but rising with every word. "No more, Marcus," she shouted, her words echoing through the room. "You don't own me. You never did. I am not your possession, and I will never let you humiliate me again." The hall fell silent. Everyone stared at Emily, shocked, but she didn't care. For the first time, her voice was louder than her fear. Marcus's eyes widened. He tried to speak, but no words came. The colonel still held his wrist, his steady gaze warning Marcus to stay silent. Emily's tears spilled now, but they were not tears of shame. They were tears of release, of strength returning after years of silence. Her body shook, but her voice stayed firm. "You wanted me to stay quiet, to bow my head and pretend everything was fine. But I won't. Not anymore. You will not break me." Colonel Carter slowly released Marcus's wrist, but his eyes never left him. "You heard her," he said simply. Marcus backed away, his chest heaving, his pride shattered. He looked around the room, but no one came to his defense. Not one voice supported him. Emily stood tall beside her father, her heart pounding but her spirit unbroken. In that moment, she was no longer the silent wife. She was the woman she had once dreamed of being, strong, unafraid, unwilling to be silenced. The dinner ended not with laughter, but with a truth that could not be hidden. Emily had found her voice, and nothing would ever be the same again. Emily files for separation, supported by her father. The papers were heavy in her hands, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. For so long, she had lived in fear, convinced that she could never escape Marcus. But now, with her father standing firmly beside her, she took the step that once seemed impossible. The news spread quickly. People who had once whispered behind her back now spoke openly. At first, Emily worried about the shame, about what others would say. But instead of pity, she found strength. Many admired her courage, saying it took more bravery to walk away than to stay in silence. Marcus, on the other hand, could not escape the disgrace. His mask of confidence and charm began to crumble. Business partners pulled away, embarrassed to be seen with him. Neighbors who once praised his success now crossed the street to avoid him. It wasn't just the slap at the wedding that ruined him. It was the truth that Emily refused to hide. By speaking out, she stripped away the lies he had lived behind. For Emily, separation was not just an end. It was a beginning. She dusted off her old notebooks, the ones filled with her dreams of becoming a lawyer. She signed up for classes, determined to start again, even though years had passed. Walking into the classroom for the first time, she felt nervous, but also alive. Each page she read, each lesson she learned, was proof that she was reclaiming herself. Late at night, when she studied at her desk, she sometimes thought back to the girl she used to be, the one full of ambition before Marcus. She smiled softly, knowing that girl wasn't gone. She had only been waiting. Emily also began to notice the change within herself. She stood taller. She spoke more clearly. She no longer apologized for existing, for laughing, for being who she was. She realized that silence had been her prison all along. Every time she had bitten back her words, every time she had forced a smile to cover pain, she had built the walls around herself. But the moment she shouted no more at Marcus, those walls began to fall. Speaking up had set her free. Her father watched her closely during these days, not with the strict eyes of a soldier, but with the softer pride of a father. One evening, he invited her to dinner. After the meal, he leaned back in his chair and studied her. "You remind me of your mother," he said quietly. "Strong, unshakable when it matters most." Emily blinked, her throat tightening. "You're proud of me for leaving Marcus?" The colonel shook his head. "I'm proud of you for protecting yourself. I could protect you from him, yes. But only you could protect your own heart, your own future. And you did." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were warm, not heavy. For so long, she had doubted herself, felt weak, felt small. But now she saw what her father saw, strength. She left his house that night with her shoulders straighter, her steps lighter. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Law school would be demanding, and healing from years of control would take time. But she also knew she was no longer afraid. She had chosen herself, and that choice made all the difference. Marcus's voice no longer echoed in her head. The voice of fear, the one that had told her she didn't deserve better, had grown silent. In its place was a new voice, her own. Strong, steady, free. Emily smiled as she walked home, whispering to herself, I am no longer his prisoner. I am mine. And for the first time in years, the words felt true. Emily sits alone, weeks later, writing in her journal. The small lamp on her desk glows softly, and the house around her is quiet. She writes slowly, her pen moving carefully across the page. She writes about her past, about the pain she once carried in silence. She writes about the slap at the wedding, the humiliation, the fear. But she also writes about the moment she stood up, the moment her voice finally broke free. Her hand pauses as she touches her cheek. The scar inside her heart feels deeper than the faint mark on her skin, but she knows both will fade with time. What will not fade is the strength she has gained. That is permanent. Emily leans back in her chair and reads what she has written. Her words no longer sound weak or broken. They sound strong, alive, filled with hope. For the first time, she sees herself not as a victim, but as a survivor who chose freedom. The phone rings, startling her. She picks it up with a nervous breath. A voice on the other end speaks warmly, delivering news she has been waiting for. Emily's eyes widen, and her hand presses against her chest. Her application to law school has been accepted. Tears rise to her eyes, but these are not tears of sorrow. They are tears of joy, of relief, of pride. She whispers a soft thank you to the voice on the line, then sets the phone down slowly. The room is quiet again, but inside her, a new song begins to play. A song of freedom and courage. Emily closes her journal, her lips trembling into a smile. She whispers to herself, barely louder than a breath, I'm free. And for the first time, she truly is. Hey friends, thanks so much for sticking around till the end. Two hearts, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more. See you next time. Sparkles.